Today we have one of our community's favorite guests, and that is Bill Holter. Bill is an awesome macroeconomic predictor of the trends that are taking place. He's also a precious metals broker. We'll link right there down below where you can get in contact with Bill. Hit the like button on today's video. Make sure that you check out our channel sponsor, which is Vizsla Silver, one of our favorite silver and gold mining stocks. So thank you, Vizsla Silver. Comment down below for the good old-fashioned YouTube algorithm. And let's dive right into today's episode. So it's good to see you, Bill.
Thanks for having me back, Ken.
Absolutely. So things are getting pretty interesting. It seems like every day the price of everything's going up. And one thing that I've noticed, maybe from the first time we talked until now, is maybe people didn't really believe the idea of significant inflation, except for people that kind of were in this economic crowd. But regardless of who you are, regardless of where you are on the political spectrum, everybody's seeing it, right? So what's going on right now?
Well, the inflation was already in the system. I mean, you could go back actually years, and the amount of credit that was built up, the amount of money supply that had built up, that's the inflation. People make the mistake of thinking inflation is the CPI or the PPI. If you dig out, and I'm going to say an old dictionary because new dictionaries, they're just arbitrarily changing the definitions of things. But the true definition of inflation is the increase in money supply. The true definition of deflation is a decrease in money supply. So we had COVID. When that hit, prior to COVID, we had the crack up in the repo market. So the Fed was pumping $100 billion a night into repo just to try to keep the most basic of basic credit instruments stable. Then COVID conveniently hit, and that was used as an excuse to just pump trillions into the system. And now you're seeing the result. Goods are becoming more expensive. And it's not just, the inflation is not only from the newly created money. Now we're having supply chain problems. And if you're pumping money into a system while you have supply chain problems, what does that do? It exacerbates it. It creates shortages, and shortages obviously create higher prices. And people being humans, when a human can't get something, they want it even more.
Absolutely. And as we're seeing all this money printing going through, and now, people such as yourself and here on this channel, we've been talking about the effects of supply chains from lockdown since day one and the consequences of it. And we've always seen it a little, but it seems to really be coming to a head right now. And I wonder how this whole thing is going to play out, because you're someone that's basically talked about the collapse of this fiat system for a long time. And I don't want to put any words in your mouth, but you've talked about this idea of even either a debt collapse or a hyperinflationary scenario. And one of the common threads that I've seen in history when these types of fiat systems that have collapsed from socialist regimes is the food is always empty in the grocery stores. The supply chains always get destroyed. And we're seeing that clear sign now starting to manifest itself.
Right. The most recent case that you could look at would be Venezuela. Mm-hmm. When we're talking about supply chains, also understand that these vaccine mandates are going to cause a huge problem. I mean, just look at, try to get on a Southwest Airlines flight now. Their pilots union, the unions are walking out. You've got FAA controllers walking out. It's going to spread. It's even in hospitals. They're already understaffed, and they're firing thousands of people at a time. Firemen, police officers. and I'm sure you're going to find out that some of the big uh, food companies are going to have walkouts. You're going to have employment or lack of employment, lack of people working to create stuff, and you're going to find shortages. So yeah, from a monetary and I did want to mention from a monetary standpoint, understand that the pumping of money supply is not because of COVID. It's because there's too much debt and the debt can't be serviced, especially with an economy that's not running on all 8 cylinders. We're probably running on 5 cylinders. So the cash flow that the economy actually creates is not enough. So what they've done is the central banks have pumped money into the system. Now you can tell that it's too much liquidity by simply looking at reverse repo. Reverse repo is now $1.6 trillion per night. And the reason the Fed is doing that is they have to prevent interest rates from going negative. There's too much cash and not enough collateral for overnight money. So the overnight money, so that they can sleep at night, are using the Fed as a counterparty because it's theoretically risk-free. They know that the Fed's not going to blow up overnight. They're going to get paid and go on to live another day. If the Fed was not acting as counterparty, that's 1.6 trillion that would be bidding on overnight collateral, and it would have pushed interest rates negative already. And we've talked about it before. You can't, especially for the world's reserve currency, you cannot have negative interest rates because that shows that the system's insolvent and the currency itself is worthless. Because if you cannot lend your reserve currency and earn interest on it, if you have to pay to lend or if you get paid to borrow, it's a complete clown show.
Interesting. So you're saying they have to keep it that way. That's what you're saying,
Yeah.
because then
Hey,
then psychologically people realize the game's up.
right, exactly. You cannot have the world's reserve currency at negative interest rates.
Hmm.
If you own something and you lend it to someone, you can't you cannot get paid to lend your supposed asset, then what does that tell you about your asset?
Not good.
Right? Right. Tells you it's worthless.
Yeah, it's amazing to watch this because, you know, you've been talking about this for a long time, and some of your statements maybe to some people seemed, maybe they understood the fundamentals, but it seemed a lot of the things maybe they're too far off. But now it almost feels, when looking at this, like this is legitimately and intentionally controlled demolition. I mean, how on earth could you continue to pump this amount of money in the system knowing no goods are being delivered? The majority of the world basically relies on a grocery store. I mean, what happened? I mean, it seemed like someone would say, "Oh, you're just a fear monger." If one would say, "Well, what happens if there's no food in the stores?" That would never happen in America. But you're starting to see this, and if they go through another round of mandates, as you suggested, you're going to have shipyard people walking out. And so I wonder, where does this go from here? You've been pretty incredibly accurate, as much as one can be, on the way the winds are blowing. What do you think the next storm is, and where do you think the winds push us through the end of the year and into 2022?
Well, first, I guess the best way to describe what you just said is our conspiracy theories have been proven true.
Pretty much.
Um, well, I mean, it's happening. It's a process.
Mm-hmm.
What's next? I don't know what's next. I do have a strong belief that this is going to end up in some form of anarchy. Now, whether it goes full Mad Max or not, I don't know. Mathematically, markets will collapse, markets will close. Now, do they pull the plug? And is it a 2-week, 2-month market holiday, bank holiday, I don't know. But it's very likely that you'll go to bed on a Friday evening, wake up Monday morning, and the world will be entirely different. Meaning, there will be bank bail-ins. You'll see brokers, insurance companies, etc., going out of business, closing their doors. And like I said, for how long it will take to try to restructure things, I don't know. But I do believe it's going to be a weekend event from a Friday to a Monday. And when there are big events, they happen on weekends because that doesn't give anyone time to do anything. Everything's closed.
Interesting. And then they just come out with an announcement, hey, here's what's happened, and eventually here's
Right,
our problem reaction solution to it.
right. And more than likely, it will be in reaction to some type of false flag event because they have to have something to point at and say, well, our policies were working except for XYZ or ABC or whatever happened.
Right, our policies were working, but now all these people aren't showing up to their job, and they're now domestic you know what, and the supply chains, it's their fault. And so I wonder, what do you think is the on the other side of this, in that what do you think the solution is for America, right? With a 14-month-old baby, I wonder, I used to think when Doug Casey would talk about secession and these things, I love Doug, but I kind of thought he was a lunatic. And he admits, he says, I don't know even how realistic that is, but he says, in my opinion, it's the best solution. Um, what do you think the solution is? And where do you think we go, not only as a country, but as a world, right? Because all these governments are following this same roadmap as well, on their own wavelengths.
We believe there's going to be two resets. The first reset will be man-made. It may include the IMF with the SDR. It'll probably include some type of digital currency, but it's going to leave those who are in power now and who caused the problems, it'll leave them still in power.
Mm-hmm.
And whether that lasts a couple weeks or a couple months, 6 months, I don't know, but it's going to fail because logically, mathematically, it won't add up. Then there will be a real reset, which will be governed basically by Mother Nature.
And I know you've talked about these two stages of the reset, but can you elaborate a little bit more on your vision behind the second reset? What does it look like, and what's on the other side of it?
Uh, I guess basically the reason for a second reset is because the first reset did not create confidence. Confidence breaks a second time.
Mm-hmm.
So when confidence breaks, then you get real market clearing uh, rates or trades or whatever you want to call it. You know, one silver dime for a dozen eggs, or uh, you get different labor schedules. You get different. Everything will be changed, but everything, water will seek its own level, so to speak, and the cream, good assets, the cream will rise to the top.
So, can I ask you this? You've talked about these things in a lot of depth for a long time, and sometimes I've totally understood what you're saying, but in all honesty, there's parts of it that I hoped wouldn't happen. You've talked about supply chain disruptions, food not being in the stores, these types of things for a long time. And it was so far out then that maybe it was hard to really see it happening, right? But now it's especially with the mandates and the amount of walkouts we're going to start seeing over the next 12, 6 months, really. And I wonder, do you still believe that the United States is the best place to be during this reset? I know you've spent time outside of the country as well, and now you're stationed in the United States. What is your opinion on that, and also the best ways that an individual can prepare?
Okay, well, first off, in my opinion, you ain't seen nothing yet as
Mm-hmm.
far as shortages. I think the real shortages, it'll be, it's obviously being started by walkouts. It's being started by people locked in their homes, et cetera, et cetera. The real shortages are going to occur once credit breaks.
Mm.
The world runs on credit. And when credit breaks, what you're seeing now is going to look like bountiful.
Mm.
Um, so
You're
tell
because
me
you're
again,
saying
what
so
was
much
the
of
last?
this. You're saying because so much of the supply chains of everything that we're getting relies off this credit system, and you're saying if that breaks, then you see a
Right,
breakdown. Yeah. Okay.
right, exactly. If think about a loaf of bread. A loaf of bread arrives at the store packaged and somebody buys it, maybe with a credit card. But it starts out with fertilizer, seed, uh, the farmer growing it, shipping it to a silo ships it to a producer. They produce the bread, and there's trucking all along. So you got truckers that are filling their gas tanks up, etc. There's probably 8 or 10 uses of credit for one loaf of bread.
Hmm.
So if any of those uses of credit break down, that bread does not make it to market.
Hmm.
Now, as far as where to go, where to weather this, as you know, we were in Costa Rica for 5 years. Decided to come back. Basically, our Spanish got good enough to understand we weren't really welcome there. They just enjoyed the money that we spent. Uh, is the U.S. going to be the safest place in the world? I don't know. All I know is I fit in here. There are still currently laws on the books called the Constitution. Um, Obviously, not totally being followed, but hopefully, hopefully we do have a return to constitutional law. You, in my opinion, if you live in a city, you're dead. If you live in a city and this thing goes down, you're dead. You've got, 1 million, 2 million, 5 million people around you. You have no idea where it's coming from, where the danger is coming from. Uh, your sources of food in a city are strictly the grocery store, which will be empty as truckers, producers, et cetera, can't get their goods to market, and it'll be Mad Max. I mean, think about the movie 30, 40 years ago, Escape from New York. That's, in my opinion, what it's going to look like. I've done what I think, uh, uh, to the best of my knowledge, needs to be done. We moved out and away from any city. You want to live rural. You want your own source of water, your own sources of power. You want to store food. You want to be able to grow food. You want to be able to hunt. You want to be able to fish. Is this going to, like I said before, is it going to last 2 months, 6 months, a couple of years? I don't know. But just do the best you can to provide the most basic necessities of life. And like I said, you want to be out and away from a population, because if you have stuff and other people don't, they're going to gravitate toward where there is stuff. In other words, your stuff is ours.
Yeah. I
So it
mean,
would be a good idea also to be able to protect. So
abs-
lead is an important metal along with silver and gold.
I gotta agree with you. I gotta move that into the precious metals category. So, what's funny about it is just that we've talked a lot and we went really into as we're kind of wrapping up here today, but we've done some really long conversations too, where I've really kind of pried into your opinion on how this plays out. And this was before a lot of this was occurring. And so I felt you, I heard you on a lot of it, but now I don't see how some form of what you're saying doesn't occur, especially the food and the supply chains. And so, for everyone listening, if you haven't prepared and you haven't at least got yourself, some water, you haven't at least got yourself some dry food storage, opportunity to get yourself out of the city. These are the we're running down on time on these, and not to make people afraid, but at this point, you have to be banging your head against the wall to not see where this is heading. We can debate whether it's intentional or unintentional, but the writing's
Right.
clearly on the wall at this point, right?
Well, first off, uh, and I wrote this probably 10 years ago, that the policies that were being put in place were too stupid to be mistakes.
Hmm.
It's in my opinion, it's intentional. And I guess this pretty much sums it up. Every morning when you wake up, you're only 72 hours away from anarchy. And the reason it's 72 hours is at the end of 72 hours, that's 3 days. That's 3 days without food. And after 3 days without food, people will be hopping pissed off, really mad. And and that's when things explode. So
One,
that, I mean, that's been a rule of thumb for hundreds of years. 72 hours when a population doesn't have food, then you're looking at the shit hits the fan moment.
yeah, it's amazing how few people have any food. If there was something with the grocery stores, with the electrical grid or anything like that, it really is amazing. I almost know. I mean, maybe in this community, right? Because we're kind of in this weird bubble. But outside of this community, I don't know that many people. I live in South Utah, and living here, one of the interesting things that I've discovered is actually that the church has multiple years of food storage actually down here,
Yes,
and they have
yes.
this whole city has an entire game plan for this stuff occurring. Everything from blocking off the road so people can't from Vegas can't get in because you come through a gorge. um, it's pretty interesting to really watch this unfold.
I'm going to tell you a real short story, which to this day I still think is kind of funny. Um, in the past, if I saw on a Saturday or Sunday an open house sign and I had time, I would I would go in just to check out the house, but of interest to me was their pantry. I always wanted to see what people had in their pantry. And you'd be amazed at how many people have 3 boxes of pasta and 2 jars of ragu, and that's it. I mean, it amazed me. And, I guess call it one of my quirks, but it was like my way of canvassing.
Yeah, it's amazing. So everyone, let's make sure we got that prepared, right? Like, think about something larger than yourself. You might have friends, family. At least get yourself some food storage to start itself off. So as we wrap up here, kind of into a final question, I know you got to roll. So does this move into a deflationary collapse or a hyperinflationary scenario or a weird combination of the two?
Well, I think you're going to see both at the same time.
Hmm.
The assets, your assets that you believe are wealth, those are going to deflate in value. But the things you need to live on a daily basis, they're going to inflate. And what's the reason this is going to be an unusual event where you have both inflation and deflation at the same time is you're going to have the fiat currencies destroyed. So as fiat currencies destroy and lose purchasing power, there's your inflation. But the problem on the asset side is everything's borrowed against, everything's leveraged. And how is that going to be paid back? It can't be paid back. There's too much debt in the world to ever be repaid with current dollars or yen or euros or what have you. So you're going to have a mass liquidation, and you're already starting to see that mass liquidation and just started in China, their real estate market in the last couple of weeks. I mean, Evergrande, people are looking at Evergrande and saying, oh, well, it's another Lehman moment. Well, yeah, it could be 5 times bigger than Lehman. And then you add in the other property developers, and it could be a complete disaster. But the real disaster is for the individuals, the businesses, the corporations, et cetera, the buyers of real estate over the last 5 years, 10 years, all done with borrowed money. It was all a speculation, and it, in the end, was a Ponzi scheme. Who are they going to sell to?
Yeah, it's amazing to watch. It's like a slow motion collapse of the house of cards, and all the power brokers know that it's collapsing, and they don't know what to do about it, and they're just hoping that somehow it won't happen. And it's interesting to watch. So then on the other side, as we conclude here, does gold move after the collapse or the psychological collapse in fiat confidence happens, and then you see the first, you said there's two resets. When the first one happens, they try to somewhat restore the confidence, or when does gold come into play with this collapse?
Well, in the first reset, you might see the powers that be reset gold to, I don't know, pick a number, $3,500. But that's not going to build enough confidence. Um, Egon Grier's put out an article, I just saw it earlier this morning, with the question, what will the price of gold be when the dollar's worth zero? The answer is infinity. What
Yeah.
will a cup of coffee be worth when the dollar is zero? Infinity. Just understand that if you own gold, that will transport your wealth from the current system to whatever the next system looks like. And if anybody other than, well, I'm going to say anybody, if anybody tells you they know exactly what the next system is going to look like, they're lying because nobody knows. But the one thing you do know is if you have gold now and you still retain that gold into the next system, you will have wealth. And if you have silver, same thing, but the silver will help you get from here to there if we get to a barter position. And I do believe that's going to happen, is that you're going to end up using silver to live and survive to the next system.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. That's for damn sure. It's going to be more interesting than I thought it was going to be 12 months ago. That's for damn sure. So, we really appreciate you coming back on. I'm glad we got good enough internet to bring you on video. In the description,
Finally,
yeah, finally. And in the description right there down below for everyone listening, you can reach out to Bill directly for precious metals right there down below in the description. Want to make sure you hit the like button on this video. Give us a comment down below for the good old YouTube algorithm. Copy and paste this and share it. What we love to do with this episode, this is an important one, right? We got to be prepared, right? Otherwise, this whole channel and everything we're doing is a waste of time. So grab a glass of wine or a cup of coffee with a friend, plug in your HDMI cable so you can watch this on a television, and watch it with some of your close friends, with some of your close families, and make sure you guys put a game plan together to prepare. We want to thank our sponsor, Vizsla Silver. Bill, is there anything that I missed? Anything else you want to wrap up with?
um, I guess I would just give you the same advice my dad gave me years ago. Just do the best you can, and I mean that's all you can do. Do the best you can. If we go through this and you forgot something, don't beat yourself up because you'll definitely forget something.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. So we want to thank everyone for listening to today's episode. It's great to have Bill back on. Let us know in the comments, Bill rules, right there down below. If you're glad to see Bill on video, we haven't been able to get that internet connection working solid enough. We got it again. So it's good to see you, Bill. And we appreciate all the work you're doing. And we encourage everyone to reach out to Bill right there down below.